I'm KaiFuLee, author of AI Superpowers and AI 2041. It's my pleasure to talk to all the attendees of the Congress of AI in Spain. AI is the most important revolution in the world, and it's incredibly exciting for me, as I'm sure it is for you, to be a part of this technological revolution. I do want to remind everyone, in the middle of all this excitement and all that AI will do for the world, disrupting every industry and making improvements to our lives, creating economic value, we should never forget that the future of this world is up to us. AI is a tool that we will harness and use to the advantage of the human race. And I look forward to sharing with you more ideas, and maybe I can talk to you in person in a future session. Thank you. Well, about 3 years ago, I published AI Superpowers, where I predicted that China would rise to be a comparable superpower in AI to the United States. And I think 3 years later, we're seeing that prediction becoming reality. And China has grown a lot in terms of technologies in research. Chinese papers are now caught up with the American papers at the top 50% level. US still leads the top 1% of the best papers, but China now publishes more decent papers than US. But US still publishes a lot more brilliant papers than China, but China's catching up. But more importantly, in terms of venture capital and the startup companies and the value of China's AI ecosystems and companies created, I think China has forged ahead. In my book, AI Superpowers, I talked about 4 types of AI. In Internet AI, I predicted US and China would be neck and neck, both very good, and I think that's roughly correct. In business AI, I predicted US is way ahead and China may catch up a little, but that didn't quite happen because I think COVID and work from home allowed US to digitize a lot of workflow, and a lot of brilliant American companies like C3 AI, Palantir went public. So I think US is way ahead in enterprise business AI. In perception AI, that is speech, language, and sensors and IoT, I predicted China would be somewhat ahead, and that's roughly correct. And then lastly, in autonomous AI, that's in 2 parts. One in autonomous vehicles, robots, the other in manufacturing, factory robots moving to commercial and residential. That's an area where US was ahead, and I thought China would catch up. But I think China's moved farther than I thought, most partly because of China's factories and very strong industrial segment, so that there is a strong initiative to want to automate the factories so that China can remain cost competitive, even though Chinese labor wages are going up. So that has received a government and in the private sector push. So China now has a lot of robots in a lot of factories, and automation is moving forward very fast. Autonomous vehicles, I think it's US still ahead, but China's catching up. So overall, if you look at research, China was behind and is catching up. And in terms of applications in 4 different sectors, China has been catching up and is more or less caught up with the United States in the realization of economic value from AI. So Sinovation Ventures, my company, we invest in high tech in general, and AI is our specialty. And we invest probably on the order of $500 million a year altogether, among which AI is probably 2/3 of that is either in AI or technology or AI applications. So probably safe to say about 300 million for us. And then we're a small part of the ecosystem. We're probably a few % of the whole ecosystem. So the whole ecosystem is on the order of maybe $10 billion or so. I don't have the exact figure, but I think we're maybe 300 million in a $10 billion pot that invests in AI in China. And that's roughly equivalent to the amount of money invested in the US. I think Europe is incredibly strong in research. If you count the total number of papers and brilliant researchers, and even the Turing Award recipients, right? The three inventors of the most important AI technology, deep learning, were all European. And I think many of them live in US and Canada. They live in US and Canada now, but they were from Europe. So that's a strong testament to how powerful the universities in Europe are, that they actually graduated the three very top people in AI today. I think the challenge in Europe is twofold. One is the commercialization of technologies has not taken place as quickly as China and US, so that these brilliant PhDs ended up working either in universities or maybe for an American company. So that value, so you created all the brains, but the value went to the US. So that's kind of one issue. The other issue then I think is natural to ask is, well, why hasn't Europe realized the value? Where are the AI startups in Europe? Now there are a few that are doing quite well, but the numbers are much, much less than US and China. And I think that's because Europe's VC ecosystem hasn't grown at the same speed as US and China. There are some very good VCs, but just not as many and not as good as US and China, because the VC's job, venture capitalist job, is to help these AI companies realize their value. And then there's a third issue I just thought of, which is Europe is one economic unit, but the countries are still very distinct in their language, usage patterns, and culture. So that if a startup company builds a great product and it sells it in Spain and achieves great success, that product is not guaranteed success in Germany or Italy. That's different from US and China, where a local success can quickly expand into a national success. And in the case of US, there's even a greater English-speaking population around the world, so that the English-speaking size is comparable to China. So these are the three reasons that I think Europe has brilliant people but hasn't realized the value from these great people. I'm most excited about AI as applied to healthcare because AI works when there's a lot of data. Think about why this Google and Facebook why are they so smart in guessing what we want to see? Why do they make so much money? It's because they have so much data, and they use the data to understand and second guess what people want to see and click and buy. And now AI is moved up to being used in financial institutions and many other applications. So I think it's reasonable to say that whatever domain has the most data explosion will likely be the area where AI will have the biggest use. So healthcare is one where we are now seeing hospitals digitize their data. We're seeing our MRI, CT, radiology becoming digitized and stored. And certainly people are wearing wearables, which measure our blood pressure, blood sugar on a continuous basis. And also genetic sequencing allows us to sequence ourselves, and that's a large amount of data. So when you connect all that data and try to build health systems that prevents us from getting disease, diagnoses what we may have, suggests what treatments might be most likely, and if we get sick, how do we recover and prevent the recurrence, and also how to keep ourselves healthy and live longer. These are all possible AI goals. AI works by having a goal to optimize. So, Facebook would tell its AI, get more people to watch my page. Amazon would say, get more people to buy my stuff. And an AI system could say, help make this person live longer and healthier. help make this person's sickness become cured, or prevent this person from getting this problem. So that would be a wonderful way to apply AI. And also there are many other areas in healthcare, such as using AI to invent new drugs, maybe in 1/10 as much cost, maybe 1/3 as much time. We are already seeing AI startups that are doing a very good job in AI drug discovery. So I believe there are many natural applications. Also, I think healthcare is one where our goals are very clear. We want to be healthy, and if we get sick, we want to be cured. So it brings an alignment between the supplier of AI and the customer, the user of AI. The patient and the AI system want the same thing, that is to be healthy. The pandemic is obviously a terrible disaster for human race, but it did have some side catalyst effect for AI research. For example, I think many people are now working on how do we gather data to predict the possible next time that a pandemic may occur. We now know that a pandemic could be stopped earlier in any given country, but you have to know that it's happening and it's likely to be growing rapidly. So there are companies looking at all kinds of data, such as, are there cities with a sudden surge of a certain kind of illness, and could that be the cause of some next pandemic? So that's using big data and AI to predict future pandemic and stop it before it gets big is one area. Another area is using AI to help come up with new drugs that can treat diseases as well as viruses, as well as potential vaccines. As we know, mRNA is quite effective, and it is a digital stream. So AI has a significant role to play. AI can also be used in very rapid testing of using robotics. This is not 20 years, this is happening now. We've invested in a company that is able to do with one robotic machine that can do 140,000 COVID nucleic acid tests per day. And that's 100 times faster than people. So that kind of rapid testing also becomes possible. And it's really because of COVID that has caused so much problem for all of us that is now pushed the frontier of research to go into all of these areas. And I think we will see greater progress now that we've learned our lesson from COVID. I think AI can play a role. It may not be the dominant role in terms of the global energy crisis. We're using more energy. It's not green. It's not good for the environment. So what can be done? I think if we project further, as I do in the book, AI 2041, the last chapter talks about the future of energy. And I'm actually optimistic in the long term. Short term, we've got some problems. For the reason that we are seeing solar cost energy becoming the lowest cost energy. Its cost has been reduced over 80% in the last 10 years. And we're also seeing lithium-ion batteries cost dramatically reduced. So if their cost reduction continues based on either the same technology improved or better technologies, I think we can get to a world where distributed energy can really save the day. Imagine that your building would have solar panels. It collects the energy during the day when the sun is hot, and then it releases and stores it in the battery, and it releases the energy at night so you can have heat. And next day it continues. Now, whenever the battery doesn't have enough energy, only then you go to the electrical grid. Now that ecosystem infrastructure doesn't yet exist today, but it can be built. So, with the cost continuing to drop 80+% every 10 years, we can foresee it would become not just good for the environment to use this new form of energy, but it's economical. It makes sense economically to do it. So I always believe that economic motivations is what will drive adoption much more than just environmental consciousness and ESG. So both are happening. So I feel optimistic that in 10 years, certainly in 20, we'll get to a world where most of our energy is using this distributed form of solar energy. So the role that AI can play is in a number of ways. First, we've turned energy from a nature problem. That is, do we have enough gas and natural and oil and fossil-based fuel, or can we manufacture it? So we've turned a natural reserve problem into a manufacturing problem. So we just need to make the solar panels and batteries more and more cheaply over time so we can all get it. So manufacturing problem is certainly much more under our control because we're not subject to, discovering oil or something. And once it's a manufacturing problem, it's suitable for automation. So robots can make them. And then robots are taught by AI. So there's the linkage, right? AI makes automation, makes manufacturing, makes solar panels and batteries, thereby giving us lower cost energy. Well, in 20 years, I think we're beginning to see changes where the economic systems may start to break down. Because if we believe the cost of energy will drop down, factories will become automated, and life science and materials will make things different, people will live longer, many of people's jobs will be challenged. So I think that immediately brings up a number of issues. One is that how does the economy provide for the poor? How does the economy provide for people whose jobs are displaced? And another is if the world is one of plenitude, that is, we can make more than enough food and water to feed everyone and build shelter so people have no worries about their basic needs, then what is the role of money and what becomes people's new aspiration? And how do we have a system that continues to encourage people to work hard and also to do something that makes themselves feel like they're growing and that they have aspiration and the self-actualization. And if money isn't the sole object, then what would be? And also, if the cost of producing goods become so much lower, how do we ensure that companies don't create artificial scarcity? That is, they can build something cheaply, but they still market it to be very expensive. So I think there are many economic challenges we have. And I think because I don't think this will happen in 20 years, right? Changes in economic thinking and systems will take much longer to understand and evolve. So in the book, I just touch on the issues. I don't really have any solutions, but I think if people saw the problems, hopefully smart people will think about what things they should work on. And I think it will also be beyond 20 years when economic systems might change. But it's in 20 years we should see these underlying changes that ought to get people thinking. I'm afraid AI's natural tendency is to exacerbate inequalities. So it will help countries strong in AI to become stronger, just like it helps AI-rich companies to grow faster than startups, and AI experts to become more successful and powerful and richer than the average worker. So because it is so fast in growth and in value creation, it helps the strong become stronger. And that means within each country, let's say US or China, there can be steps to reduce the growing inequality among the people and among the companies, perhaps by antitrust or by taxation and social welfare and universal basic income. But as you ask the question, who's going to take care of the poorer countries? I think that is a bigger problem, because within the country, within US, the U.S. can tax Tesla and Elon Musk and give universal basic income to the poor people to give them a chance and a buffer. And they can tax Tesla and give money to small, medium business. But who is going to help the poorer countries who currently don't have a strong economy, and worse yet, don't have a lot of technologies and AI technologies, and don't have a lot of data to drive that? So that I think is an issue. We're seeing some countries come up with various suggestions and requests, and I think those should continue. One is for countries to assert that the data belongs to my country, so they must reside within the country, and there should be some way to share the success and wealth with the people from whom the data is collected, so that it's not just making Facebook and Google rich, but that the citizens of the poorer countries, if their data is being collected, they should get some remuneration. Other things would be countries really should pick their smartest and brightest that are mathematically inclined and send them to the best universities and learn AI and other technologies, because it's clear the importance of technologies are increasing. Also, I think companies should focus on how AI can be applied to their local strong industries, right? So, if a country is very good in making wine, can AI make better wine? Can AI be used in vertical farming? Can AI be used to, help your food industry grow better, or whatever the local industry it is? Because AI is something that's used for every industry. And finally, I think one segment that will grow that isn't necessarily AI infused is the service industry. I think as AI starts to take over and displace routine work in the factory and white collar, service jobs will become more important, because some of the people who become wealthy are going to want more service, right? Concierge service and bartender and tour guide and personal tutor and so on. So those will grow. And also people living older and longer are going to need more healthcare services. So people who are into nurses, orderly caretakers at elderly homes and foster homes, these are growing in number of jobs. The World Healthcare Organization estimates over 10 million more jobs are needed in healthcare services, and there are many other service industries. So countries can think about whether some of their economic growth should be in services. So these are some of the ideas to think about. It's certainly not hopeless, but it's important for the countries that are in developing status to realize that first, these job displacements are coming, and if the poor country's economy is mostly routine jobs, it is particularly endangered. And they also need to be aware that the model that China and India took to grow out of developing status may not be applicable anymore, right? China basically used the lower cost labor to become the blue collar work for the Western world. India used its English-speaking population that are willing to take the jobs that the Western world don't want to do and outsource the business process. But in the future, AI will end up being the outsourced work, whether it's to be used in the factory or in the office space for outsourcing. So countries that had hoped that they would take the China model or India model to climb out of poverty, that model may not work. They really need to think about a few steps ahead when AI becomes popular. What is the role that their country can play in such a future? Yes, one of the stories in AI 2041 is called quantum genocide. It has a bad person behind both using a quantum computer to steal bitcoins and also to become a terrorist and use autonomous weapons to basically do genocide on a particular type of people. In the story, it happens to be intellectuals that he wanted to go kill. And the danger in autonomous weapons is that you can already build a drone that has an ability to hone in on the person, seek and find the person, hone in on the person, fly near the person, and point blank shoot the person dead. So that capability is effectively a $1,000 assassin that carries almost no liability for the terrorist, because it's not like suicide bomber. You have to wrap a bomb around yourself and go sacrifice your life in order to kill someone, or someone holding a gun to shoot someone point blank, risking that their picture will be taken or police will trace them down. You're letting a drone do the killing. So this is incredibly dangerous, both at the single assassination level, and also if a terrorist group collects 100,000 of these drones, then they can kill half a city. They can kill all the men or all the women or all the people of a certain race in a city. And that, I think, is incredibly dangerous. And I would say it's even more dangerous than nuclear weapons, because nuclear weapons, while more disruptive, has a property known as mutual assured destruction, which means if country A fires nuclear weapon at country B, they need to know a likely consequence is country B, while it may be destroyed, will fire back before they're destroyed. So both countries are mutually destroyed. Therefore, it creates a deterrence. And that's why ever since the World War II, there hasn't been a nuclear war, is because this property of mutually assured destruction. Autonomous weapons does not have such a property. You may not be able to trace back, and it's not the full destruction. So it's already beginning to be deployed. We're seeing some cases of some presidents have faced assassination attempts by drones already. And there are also other drones that have already killed top-level military personnel and even scientists. We don't know what degree of autonomous status those drones are, but clearly we know that AI and software will pull the trigger more accurately and quicker than the human. So it's definitely going to move in that direction. And I think the dangers of autonomous weapons have been made clear by a number of scientists in the letters that they have signed. These are AI experts who wanted governments to at least start talking about how to regulate autonomous weapons, but not much progress has been made. So I'm with the scientists feeling that this talk and discussion should begin, because it's inevitable that an autonomous weapon-driven 9/11 will hit us in the coming maybe 5 or 10 years. I can see two possible outcomes. One is that all our data is given back to us, and that we find a way for our privacy to be protected by technology, so that all our data can be used to train AI, but the commercial applications don't ever see our raw data. So people are working on that area. It's called privacy computing. It's very consistent with the GDPR and what Europe is trying to do. And I think GDPR as it exists today makes protection decent, but makes it hard to aggregate the data to deliver value from AI. But if we had privacy computing, then the future might allow us to have our cake and eat it too. It's an American slang describing you can have best of both worlds. And the way privacy computing would work is that you would keep your data in places that you trust. Let's say I trust my hospital to have my medical data, but nothing beyond that. So if Spain wanted to develop a great cancer treatment for its citizens, it could say, hey, each hospital, take all your patient records and run this software to train on all your patients. Then don't show me the app. Don't show me all the data for each individual, but just give me the aggregated model from each hospital. then the hospital models can be grouped together for a grand AI that's built out of every citizen, but no, it doesn't see any citizen's data. So that is a possible future in which we get our data back, and through some technology, it becomes usable for AI, but doesn't expose your privacy. I think there are still a lot of issues. This is not proven, but it's a possible direction. Another possible direction is to say, hey, AI will work so great if it had all of my data. Imagine if Google somehow knew everything about me. It can provide even a better service. But I'm already very worried about the data they already have. So what can we do? Well, possibly you can have an entity that really has all of your data, that you trust that entity. And that entity could be your intelligent agent or your phone, or it could be a company that you trust, or a government that you trust, could be any of the cases. And then you trust your data to that entity, but no one else. And that entity would then negotiate on your behalf with various companies. So let's say I have a personal assistant that has all my data, and then Facebook says, I want to know where KaiFuLee lives. Then the agent would say, why do you need to know that? And then Facebook would say, well, I need to send the package he just ordered. Then the agent would say, okay, you can have it, but it's encrypted. You need to delete it after you use it, right? Or if it says, Facebook says, oh, I just want to target him with ads. If I know his address, he'll get better ads. Then my agent will say no. But another person who doesn't mind getting targeted by ads might say yes. See, the problem with privacy for us is all of us want to give our data to as few people as possible. But these AI, these systems, they don't work if they don't have some data from you. And we individually don't know enough about what the apps are doing to give them data occasionally. So then the result is I take all the data back, then nothing works. Or I give you all the data, then I don't know what you'll do with it. So what we really need is an intelligent gateway that I trust to give only the minimal data, and then it's anonymized or encrypted as much as possible to the least number of people, depending on how much I care about privacy. I have personally worked on AI for about 40 years, and it's incredibly exciting to come to see that AI has come to maturity and is about to be a technology used in many industries. It will create a lot of changes, and it's important for people, I think, to understand what will happen in the future. But AI is a deep technology, and some people don't understand it, others feel intimidated by it. So I wondered if we painted a picture of our lives 20 years from now that is entertaining from a storytelling point of view, but also scientifically accurate on what's feasible. So I sought out a co-author, Chen Qiufan, who is a well-known science fiction writer, and then we proceeded to write the 10 stories that present our future vision in 10 different parts in the world as a way to excite, stimulate, and entertain people. And at the same time, they would learn all about AI. I tend to be quite optimistic. My co-author is a little bit pessimistic. So hopefully we find a reasonable midpoint. Science fiction writers have to introduce some chaos in order for the stories to be popular. But from my standpoint, I'm optimistic because historically speaking, every technology breakthrough, like electricity, PC, internet, mobile phones, have all led to so much progress and positive aspects to the society. When they were first introduced, there were problems, just like there are problems with AI. When electricity was introduced, people got electrocuted. When internet was connected to the PC, viruses came about. There was Y2K. A lot of worries when the new technology comes out. That's normal. But over time, it's worked out. So it's historical data that gives me more confidence that we are facing challenges with AI today, but I'm pretty confident given time, certainly in 20 years, we will work them out.